Morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. My name is Punditer, and today I will be addressing the French elections that occurred this past Sunday. Now, I have two articles I want to break down and illustrate my points very clear to you, along with a summary, or to sum it up in the end, my opinions on how it affects everything. So, without further ado, let's start with the first article from CNN titled, Far Right Leads the First Rounds of France's Parliamentary Election in Blow to Macron. And they write, Marine Le Pen's far-right National Rally, RN, party led the first round of France's parliamentary elections on Sunday, taking it closer to the gates of power than ever before. I would argue yes, but that can change this upcoming election on Sunday. So don't expect that Marine Le Pen is going to still hold, the percentage in the parliament and or any higher position that, maybe she might be the prime minister. So we shall see. Just due to how a few years ago, the French parliament formed a coalition to stop the National Rally from taking over France's parliament. So that is one example, which is why I am saying be cautious and also be very grounded with your expectations just because of that. And I have a feeling, again, I could be wrong, that is what is going to happen on Sunday, that Macron's party and the left-wing New Popular Front party is probably going to do the same, just because they don't want Marine Le Pen's party to win, just due to, you could argue, internal policies that may or may not change the position of where France is within the EU and NATO and just even globally. Continuing, after an unusual high turnout, the RN bloc clenched 33.15% of the vote, while the left-wing New Popular Front, NFP, coalition came second with 27.99%. And President Emmanuel Macron's Assembly Alliance slumped to a dismal third with 20.76%, according to the final results published by the Interior Minister on Monday. So we can see here that the National Rally Party would have to take somewhere from 37 to 40% to secure more control from the other two major parties in the French parliament. But if both parties, that of the Assembly Alliance and the New Popular Front, were to form a coalition, which again, they're, already in the talks of doing such a thing, then it would surpass the National Rally by about 48.75%, give or take on how the second snap election goes this upcoming Sunday, like I said. And they continue to write, while the RN appears on track to win most of the seats in the National Assembly, it may fall short of the 289 seats required for an absolute majority, suggesting France may be heading for a hung parliament and more political uncertainty. I would argue yes, if not just two parties from a coalition, but all the rest of the minor parties do as well. Again, this political uncertainty is already taking place after the EU 2024 elections that occurred 2 weeks ago. And I have a video that covered that, so you can also check that out on my channel. Now, just with how Germany and the Netherlands elections have gone, you could also look at them on how they've been acting internally with the, for example, the AFD party. They're also very concerned and not happy, to put it lightly. Not to mention how all of this affects the Ukrainian war, because you're now having the Ukrainian president that is concerned that he won't be getting his aid with what the new upcoming so-called far-right parties have been talking about in terms of cutting aid to Ukraine, whether that be monetary aid or military aid in general, which I would argue we shall see, as I personally don't think they will, just due to having too much to lose in that sort of proposition in terms of European security, economic stability, and the balance of power at play, which doesn't really mean the European continent itself. It's also reflecting on Asia, Africa, the Middle East, Latin America, and North America, just to make it more general for a lot of people who seem to think I'm talking about Europe, which, yes, is the primary conversation, but it's not just that. You got to think outside the box. And their final section that I do want to address, the election which Macron called after his party was battered by the National Rally in European Parliament elections earlier this month, could leave him to see out the remaining 3 years of his presidential term in an awkward partnership with a prime minister from an opposition party. And this is what I have to say. It is only going to get more awkward for Macron in his little pride that he has left, just because of how he handled the Yellow Vest protest and the pension/retirement policies in France. As we all know, those were quite interesting protests, and I would argue that very much showcased his weakness, not to mention what happened with this first part of the snap elections in France as well. And I want to add a little icing to the cake. He lost a lot of French military bases in Africa, damaging France's military dominance in, you could argue, North Africa in general, just due to how Russia was playing, I would argue 4D chess regarding how they were focusing primarily on Ukraine and also in the Middle East, that they lost sight of what was most precious, you could argue, to the French elite and the military, and the control of some specific continental sphere. So understand that very clearly. Now, I do have one final article from Al Jazeera titled, "Not One More Vote. Reactions as France's far-right wins snap election." And there's going to be another 3 sections that I'm going to be breaking down for you guys. So the first one, they say, "The National Rally breakthrough was welcomed on the hard right of European politics." So this is what I have to say. Again, define hard far right in general, because to me, they're not at all. More like they're center right or just plain right wing in general, as their positions seem to be having more control over their borders and immigration policies, and either stopping or telling Ukraine to negotiate with Russia to end that stupid conflict, which to me seems more reasonable rather than how it's portrayed by other countries, the media, and politicians, of basically, spreading fear-mongering narratives that, oh, these guys are going to do something horrific, which, again, realistically, they're not going to. And then there's another section here. Viktor Orban, Hungary's prime minister, expressed optimism following the first round results. Again, I would advise for less high hope optimism and more grounded expectations, with just how other elections in the past few years promised the exact same thing. And I will get to that after this little tidbit. Orban's comment came as Hungary took over European Union's rotating presidency amid widespread concerns over the critics see as country's authoritarian Russian-friendly government. Again, I wouldn't call them Russian-friendly governments at all, more like providing pragmatic solutions than blindly supporting a losing war and following the herd of anti-Russian countries and politicians. Now here is what I mean about the whole optimism. Fellow right-winger Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni claimed that attempts to demonize hard right voters were failing. This is laughable. This is a joke. Yet, she's failed in Italy with her false promises, mind you, which, again, proves my point. And this is why I think having a wait-and-see approach to what these so-called far-right parties and politicians promise their people and the global community should not be supported without skepticism at all. As I hate to break it to you people, but I think more people are believing what they hear versus what they see. And I do want to mention this. Believe nothing what you hear and, believe of half of what you see. That should be the motto when it comes to, politics in general, in my opinion. Now, to sum it all up, or rather to gather my thoughts, there will be some changes, but don't expect any rapid changes or policies that to me realistically are unfeasible to apply without doing drastic measures that may not be suitable to the kind of heart. There is something also that I noticed from all of this as well. There is a difference between how the urban population and the rural population are even more divided in different ways. For example, in France, we see the urban citizens being more left-leaning, dare I say even more socialist in that regard, and the rural citizens more right-leaning in terms of how they want their country managed. While the exact opposite in South America is much more evident, for example, with Argentina, with how the cities there are more center-right / libertarian and also, you could argue, right-wing, versus the countryside over there is more left-leaning, or maybe even socialist, dare I say. That is one of those things that I think we all got to pay attention to. It's not just, oh, well, it's going to be a general thing that the country is going to be right-wing and the cities or urban population is going to be left-wing. No, that's not necessarily always true. So let's make that very clear. And just to sort of address one major factor too, how the policies in terms of global and regional conflicts will be resolved with elections like this, particularly with Marine Le Pen's voice of putting less aid and more negotiation pressures on Ukraine. We shall, wait and see. But I doubt it, as there's too many investors. They don't want to lose the land that they bought in Ukraine, which is why it might be more difficult to say that to the people that voted these particular parties and politicians into office. But I'm telling you this because I'm being realistic with you. Also, one last note on that. They're also very selective on which countries they want to implement those ceasefire negotiation policies and propositions, as primarily that's more in Europe, i.e., Ukraine. Obviously, the Middle East is a lot more complicated just due to resources, religion, in terms of the origins of Abrahamic faiths, and again, geopolitical 4D chess moves over there as well. Other than that, all I got to say is we got to see how the snap election continues this upcoming Sunday. I would advise people to keep your expectations low. And if you also have any other questions or concerns, or perhaps other points you think I've missed or haven't addressed, or that you want me to sort of talk with you about in the comments, please let me know, and I would be more than happy to do so. Otherwise, I would greatly appreciate it if you can leave a like and subscribe to my channel. And I'll be providing you more videos on topics, not just on elections, but economics, war, and other geographical significance. So other than that, you have a great day, guys.